Hey everyone, my name is Amber. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Amber Reads Romance. Today I'm here with another weekly wrap-up. I'm going to be going over all the books that I read this past week. I have about 7 books, I believe, to go over. There were a couple good ones in there. So let's go ahead and quickly dive into my weekly reads. Okay guys, so as I said before, I have about 7 books to go over. These are actually all the books that I read from the 21st to the 27th. I had some really good ones in here. A couple of them were actually arcs, which I'm really excited to talk about. And then I finally listened to an audiobook for Dom, so I can't wait to go into that. But anyways, let's go ahead and start. So the first book that I read was Asking for Trouble by Giana Darling. This was an arc, and I was so excited that I got to get the arc for Giana Darling because I just love her so much. And she's such a sweet person. Unfortunately, this was delayed a little bit, which wasn't a big deal for the arc readers because they did push back the release because she did get a pretty bad case of COVID. And so she's, you know, had to delay it, and I think fans should understand that. But anyways, this is 7.5 in the Fallen Men MC series. I absolutely love the Fallen Men MC series. It's like one of my favorite MC romances. I think these were the first MC romances that I had ever read. So I just love it. I love this world that Giana built. I thought when this was first coming out, she said it was going to be a novella, but it wasn't really a novella. It was a full book. It wasn't as long as her recent ones where they were like almost 600 pages. So maybe it's kind of like a novella for her at this point. But anyways, I think it was like 350 or something pages. This one is Boner's romance. Yes, his name is Boner. Obviously, that's his MC name. But this is Boner's romance, and I didn't realize I needed Boner's romance till I read this because, you know, he was always kind of like in the background. He did have key roles to play in previous like plots throughout the series, but I absolutely loved him in this book. So in this book, we have Blue and Boner. And Blue is working like that really late shift at the gas station, kind of in the middle of nowhere. So it's kind of a dangerous time, but she's pretty tough. She's a really amazing heroine. And Boner comes in one night and he's immediately taken with her. She is this blue-haired, curvy, sexy, voluptuous woman, and he's instantly attracted. She's pretty attracted to him, but you know, he's pretty tatted up, and she could kind of tell, like, you know, she doesn't want anything to do with like criminals, or her family was a very bad upbringing for her, so she tries to stay away from that. But during this meet, like, he's coming in and he goes to the back and these guys come in and they start to rob her, and they're also threatening her with assault, like sexual assault or like almost kidnapping of her. And she kind of is in that where it has the cage, so she's kind of protected, but they're trying to get into her. And so Boner basically takes matters in his own hands and beats the shit out of these guys. And they're kind of coming to, and they're pretty dangerous individuals, so they end up kind of running outside, and they are trying to get away because the guys are like literally shooting at them. And so they jump into, they had cut the tires to his bike, which you don't mess with a, you know, MC guy's bike. But so they had to jump in their van, these criminals' van, and they kind of take off. And then they find all this jewelry, like a huge heist amount of stuff in the back of the van. So they know they've kind of found something bigger here. And these people have been doing these big robberies and stuff. And they are trying to like chase them down and find them. So he kind of like rescues her, and then he ends up taking her back to the MC with him. And she's like, "You're Fallen Men member?" And she's like, "No, I'm not going in there. Like, I don't want anything to do with like criminals or that kind of life." And he basically like woos her in that van immediately, and they like hook up and stuff. It's pretty hot, and she ends up going in there with him, where they're gonna get the MC's help. The thing is she doesn't want to bring trouble into his life and the MC's life because she actually has ties to one of their previous enemies. In the previous book, Rooster was like in this other MC. I think it's the Right Rider's MC, and he betrayed like the hero from the previous book. And so he's a pretty big enemy. That never fully got resolved, like what he did. He like betrayed him, and this is actually her father, and she had ran away from the MC. She was kind of forced into like a marriage with one of his like right-hand men, or like, I couldn't remember if he was where he was but he's a pretty dangerous guy. She was pretty abused in this home, and so she kind of ran away, was kind of like trying to stay away from them. And her father wants her back. And so this group of people that were trying to take her have ties to Rooster. So that leads into the whole shitstorm. But Blue and Boner just have this amazing it's pretty insta love. Like, they're very into each other right off the bat. But we have this stuff keeping them apart because she's kind of forced to go back to Rooster. And then kind of have this secret relationship with him. And he's trying to get her out. And he's willing to do anything it takes to be with her and to keep her safe. And they also have to figure out why these people are, like, why Rooster's people have moved back into town and are coming after their MC. So it has very action-packed. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's very sexy. Boner, which she calls him Bones, is so swoon-worthy. Like, I loved him so much. He did so many of these little actions showing how much he cared about her. Like, she's does hair and nails and stuff, and he goes into the salon and has her paint his nails just so he could be with her because they couldn't really be together. And he's just adorable. Like, this man is like book boyfriend material. He's got piercings down there, which was great. He's too big. Like, that's why he has that nickname, is he's very large. So absolutely loved this. I thought it was such a great addition. I loved seeing all the fallen men again. I mean, this guy is even more like romantic, maybe not more, but at the level of King, who I absolutely love. But it was just great seeing side characters, seeing some new ones of like hints of couples to come. So I absolutely adored this. I ended up giving it 5 stars and 3 chilies, and I had such a great time. Okay, so then I read another arc, and this is So Real by Abby Millsaps. This is the second book in the Boys of South Chapel series. I had the arc for the first one. This is a reverse harem, like why you choose kind of romance. In the first book, it did leave off on a cliffhanger. We do have Hunter. She had been in love with Greedy when they were younger, when they were like in high school and everything. They were like so deeply in love. She had a miscarriage and lied about it to him and kind of like ran off. She was very traumatized. He ended up becoming her stepbrother, which she was like devastated by. And she ended up fleeing to London, and she comes back home a few years later, and she starts to get in a relationship with his best friend Levi, as kind of like a fake dating thing, but they have a very good connection. Levi was bi, and Greedy was his best friend, and then they all end up kind of living in the same house together. And Greedy is just doesn't understand what happened, why she left him. He has no idea she had a miscarriage or that she lost a baby. And so it's just really hard to see. Greedy is like my baby. So that was kind of like the first book, and they finally like all come together at the end of that, and it ends in a cliffhanger because her older lover from London, when she was staying there for a couple years, shows up on the doorstep, and he happens to drop the bomb about her miscarriage to Greedy. So Greedy's left with this like what the F moment. So this picks up right where that left off, and it's just really hard to watch Greedy go through such pain, and like he's just so upset because then he finds out, you know, he lost this baby, didn't know about it. She didn't tell him. She ran away from him and never talked to him again. And then he finds out Levi, his best friend, had known about it because he was there with her when it happened. And so he just feels very betrayed. And now you have this guy, Spence, that's this billionaire, you know, huge guy from like London, like in the UK. And he shows up and is like pretty dominant. And I just didn't really like his character that much in this. They have a very dom-sub relationship. There's a lot of flashbacks where we get to see what happened to her when she went to the UK and how she met him, and they started this dom-sub relationship. And, you know, she has, she's suffering from something like a condition where she has really bad periods, and like it takes her into deep depressions because it's so hormonal. And so you have to, there's a lot of tough stuff you have to watch Hunter go through her periods, through like the trauma of losing her baby and all that kind of stuff. And she's in this weird dom dynamic with Spence. And there's like a lot of degradation, which if you know me and my channel, I don't like degradation. And that's like their main thing that they do. So I don't know. I just didn't fully invest in that relationship or him. And then he shows up and like wants to be a part of her life and like just dropped this bomb on Greedy. And it's like, and instead of like them being there for Greedy, it was like they like basically pushed him off to the side. He literally has to watch her become submissive and kneel at like the guy's feet, and he's degrading her, and he's just so like mind fucked by this. So I was very upset by Hunter's actions in this book because I felt like she put Greedy through enough, and then she continued to do it through most of this book. And then Levi was like, instead of being there for Greedy, was immediately like going to Hunter and being there for Hunter, and like, and then he got like super into Spence. So there is some stuff going on here and some major sharing. There was a super hot tub scene. And so Levi's like already into, you know, Spence too. And so near the end, we finally get like our resolution and her working through things with Greedy, and then them all coming together. My thing was, I just felt like Greedy was just treated so badly, and I didn't really fully buy into the Spence relationship. So we'll see. The dynamics were interesting, and I did, you know, think it was very spicy. This one was a lot more spicier. It does leave off on another cliffhanger because turns out she had been involved with another guy too. I mean, this girl really gone around, and Greedy, by the way, didn't have sex with anybody after her, and was like, did so many things like waiting for her to come back that it made me just dislike her a lot through some of this book. So I don't know. It was tough, but I ended up giving it 4 stars. If it was an arc, I might have given it 3.5, but I'm a little bit nicer on arcs. So I did give it 4 stars and 4 chilies, and I will definitely read the next one because I want to see how this story ends. Okay, so then I finally read Dom. I actually listened to this on audiobook. I ended up buying it on Audible during one of their sales. And the thing is I actually read, you know, Nero and King, and I was trying to get to Dom way back because I got the arc for Hans. And I didn't get to Dom in time when I had to read that arc, so I actually just skipped ahead, read Hans, and then now I'm finally going back and reading Dom. I had to go back because I had heard so many people say that like Dom was their favorite, and I definitely see that because I just loved this book so much. I loved Dom. The thing is, I really loved Hans, but they're so different, the books, that it's like they kind of hold maybe tie for my favorites of the series. But I really love this one. Dom is the head of the mafia in Chicago, I believe. And he ends up running into our heroine, who is Val, I believe. Yeah, Val. And Val is King's sister, actually half-sister. Her upbringing is really sad when you get to hear everything she went through. She is his half-sister. His dad had an affair with her mom and kind of kept her on the side. And she didn't even know her dad had this whole family. He was just always gone and didn't stay with them. And then when he dies, she's at the funeral and she sees like, oh, survived by his wife and his kids. And she's like devastated because she had no idea about this family. So she always felt very unwanted. Her mother was very emotionally abusive to her. So she's a horrible woman. So like Val has never really had like love or felt chosen. I mean, even King and like his sister kind of accept her into the family, but they don't really look out for her. They're not really fully involving her in their lives. So she just kind of feels unwanted, and it just breaks your heart. And she is a curvy heroine, which S.J. Tilley tends to write a lot of. I think this whole, like, I don't understand why every heroine in this series is plus size or curvy. I mean, I guess that's what she writes, because I read her newest book and it's another curvy heroine, but I'm like, we could mix it up a little bit, but that's fine. Because I did think the representation was really well done by S.J. Tilley. But they end up meeting at the airport, and this whole thing is kind of set up by Dom, but she thinks they just had this little accident. He breaks her backpack, and he buys her like an expensive one, and then she ends up getting moved to first class next to him, and he's like, so all this stuff happens, and they end up kind of like hooking up at the airport. Like, I think it was like in the changing room or the breastfeeding room or something, but they end up hooking up, like giving each other numbers, and they've been like texting for months. And so he's got a long goal here. He's got a plan. He wants to be with her in order to get into the alliance. So when she tells him she's in Vegas for like a bachelorette party, he literally is like, oh, I'm in Vegas right now too. Flies out to Vegas, gets her pretty drunk, maybe a little bit of a drugging, and they get married. And so now he's like, takes her back and goes to King and is like, I'm part of your family now. I'm in the alliance. And so King is fucking infuriated, you know, and she feels so betrayed because she finally felt like somebody loved her and cared about her and was into her. And Dom really is into her, but he, you know, had this plan set up. But he is very protective and very into his woman. And so they end up starting this marriage, and they do have to kind of get over that hump of him lying and setting her up to be like married to him. But I just loved it. Dom is so alpha, so touch her and you die. I just loved him. He was really swoony. And there's some birth control tampering in this, which I know is crazy, but I always love that. So I really enjoyed this one. I listened to this on audiobook, and so I gave it 5 stars and 3.5 chilies. Okay, so then I read Homestead by Care Clint. I'm finally catching up so that the next book is going to be coming out soon. I don't remember when it's coming out, but we're finally getting to Max Romance, which we've been waiting for like books for that to happen because he was introduced way back. So in Homestead, this is between Jimmy and Chloe, and this one was pretty thick compared to her other books. These are usually like novellas or less than 300 pages. And this one was like 350 or longer, I think. So I was kind of surprised by that. So it was a little slow going for me, but it's basically Chloe had during when everything went down. If you don't know, this is the 7th book in the Kindled series, and this is a post-apocalyptic. There was a, you know, asteroid that hit in like the UK, and so this is usually like 10 years later kind of thing. But when that happened, she went off with her parents had died before it happened with all the chaos. And she went off with her grandpa, who was kind of like, you know, a prepper. He was always like ready for this. And so they go out, they lived up in the middle of like nowhere in this woods. And so they lived there for years and they did okay. But as always, the supplies start running out. And so they're branching out further. And they end up kind of going to this area that ends up being what they call, I think, like the border or something. I can't remember. But it has all the criminal elements there. So they get attacked. Her grandpa dies. And Jimmy ends up saving her. And so he takes her back to his town. And, you know, she meets the people there, and she's very scared because she doesn't have anybody, and she wants to be able to have safety and be part of this community. And so he ends up coming to her because he is attracted to her. She's a beautiful young woman, and he basically is lonely, and he needs help on his homestead. He has his own like little ranch that he has with a house and everything, and so he needs a partner. And so he offers her, hey, like, will you be my woman, be my partner? You know, I'll offer you protection and safety. And she immediately agrees because she's very scared and she wants that protection. And he's a good looking guy, you know. And so she basically moves in with him and they start this kind of relationship. But the thing is, there's a little bit of a power dynamic in her head too. He never forces her into anything. He wants her to take it slow. But she's very into it. She is always up for the sex. But the thing is that she thinks if she doesn't do everything he wants, be perfect for him, he'll kick her out. Even though he gives her he never makes her, where she should feel like that. He is very supportive. He always wants to give her pleasure too, not just her give him blowjobs, which she does a lot of. So I kind of got annoyed with this character because Chloe was very like submissive and like wouldn't speak her mind and was just willing to be like the perfect Stepford wife just so he could offer her protection. And, you know, of course we got a broody kind of quiet hero because that's what Claire Kent does. And so he's not telling her, you know, I feel more. He's like expecting her to like kind of know that. So it's kind of that issue is a big issue in this. So I did really like it. It wasn't my favorite. The last two, I think I gave both 5 stars. So this one I didn't like as much. I think it was a lot more on the day-to-day life, which I can find interesting. I thought the homestead survival aspect of that was interesting. The heroine was just kind of driving me crazy. And so I ended up giving this one 4 stars, but we do get to see Mac again, which was great, and it's going to lead into his book, which is going to be the final book in the Kindled series. And so I'm really excited to see what happens with Mac. So again, I gave this 4 stars and 3 chilies. Okay, so then I read or listened to another audiobook. This was an ALC that I got. This is Gorgeous Villain by Charity Ferrell. And this is the 3rd book in the Marchetti Mafia series. I have never read this author before, so this is a new to me author. And so obviously I haven't read the other books in this series. I don't think it detracted from this book at all, but you could tell with the way this timeline was in this book that it was kind of going over stuff that happened in the previous 2 books through this couple's like POV, through their perspective. So I think it would have been better to read the first couple books to kind of get that, but it didn't make this like bad or anything. So this is between Antonio Lombardi and then Gigi Marchetti, and she is the mafia princess to Christian Marchetti, who he's like, I think the first book I'm guessing was her dad. And she actually happens to witness Antonio killing somebody in a really kind of creative way. Instead of just shooting him, he's like poisoning him with like a snake's poison and stuff. So it was pretty crazy. But she sees it and he catches her, and they immediately have this like connection. They're instantly attracted to each other. And so he kind of starts to become obsessed with her, stalk her, and he pursues her at different events, and they start this kind of like secret interaction. Their family, nobody else knows that they're really like reaching out to each other. Her father does not want her involved with him. They are like rival, you know, crime families. But when things get kind of complicated in their kind of secret relationship thing, because they even more have to be secret because things happen in the mafia, a lot of shit goes down that I'm guessing is from the first couple books, that leads their families to go to war. And so it's a lot of mafia politics in this, a lot of mafia plot line going on. Honestly, the thing that made this go lower 1 star for me was they are barely together. They're constantly apart. They kind of have these interactions to each other, like once in a while. They can barely get together because their families are at war. But, you know, we're told how much he's obsessed with her and she's into him. So I didn't feel the emotional connection whenever they were together and that we're supposed to believe they're in love, because they were barely together throughout this book. It was so much of them being separate. And so it was a little slow going for me. Honestly, like, I'm glad I got the audiobook because it made it go a little faster. But it kind of just felt like sex, like the relationship was sex, because the only time they got together it was like sexual. Like, so the other thing that I thought was missing in this was he was a single dad, and you get to see the softer, sweeter side of him and how protective he is of his daughter. And then you barely have her spending time with his daughter because they're secret and apart the most of the book. And so, like, I wanted more of that, of her building a relationship with his daughter and seeing him in that element. So it ends up being kind of like a forced marriage type of situation because he is trying to protect her, plus he wants her for himself. So it kind of captures her. So a little kept her captive at one point, but she's not that, like, unwilling, because she's been in love with him and wants to be with him. So I thought it was okay. I wasn't fully invested in it. So I ended up giving this 4 stars, and then 3.5 chilies. I did like the narration. It was narrated by Tor Tom and Kylie Stewart. And Tor Tom has like that very deep voice that I thought was like, he's very perfect for like the Mafia man in audiobooks. I think the last Mafia book that I listened with him was actually where he was Remo Falcone's voice. So I thought maybe that's why I love his voice. Okay, so then I read another arc, and this is Broken by Serena Akeroyd. This is not going to be coming out, I believe, August 1st, but I wanted to jump into it now and get it read as quickly as I could. This is a priest romance, so it is taboo. It may be tough for people, some people to read. I didn't find it too taboo or bad because, you know, I'm not that religious, but I think it's handled in a responsible way. It deals with like questions in faith and maybe hypocrisies and some kind of people practice in faith where, you know, they commit horrible sins and then go to confession and they think that they're like okay now. Like, so it deals with a lot of stuff. There's a lot of dark content in this, but I really loved this. I think it was so different. You know, I love Serena Akeroyd, and this felt like a completely different book from all her other books that I've read. It was so unique, and it had a very unique pacing and different writing style for her. So I was very intrigued by this book. So in this, we have Savio and Andrea. And Savio has been through it. He's a priest. He was captured by this like crazy group that were pretty evil and doing horrible things. And he was like forced to be their captor and give them like, listen to their confessions and all that kind of stuff. And he wouldn't, like, you know, it was just tough for him because he wasn't going to give them the out or whatever, or atone from their sins and everything like that, because they were truly evil, that they did like horrible acts to make him, you know, do that. So forgive them for their sins and all that kind of stuff. So he went through a lot. He's very broken. He's very questioning his path, but he's trying so hard to do what he thinks God wants him to do. And so he's bounced between all these different congregations because he just can't really find his place. And the thing is that he's listening to confessions, and there's some horrible people that will confess crimes, and he takes it upon himself to punish them by killing them. So then he also feels a lot of guilt for doing that, and so he ends up punishing himself. He does like that self-flagellation or whatever that's called. Like, he has like that spike thing where he like whips his back, and he has all these extreme scars on his back. So just beware, there's a lot of self-harm in this, and it's really brutal self-harm. He like will have such bad wounds, they're bleeding for hours, and it's horrible. So he's kind of in this state of place when Andrea comes into his life. Now, Andrea is one-of-a-kind heroine. She's been kind of like basically his obsessed stalker. She saw him on TV, I think when she was like 14, when he had first gotten captured, and she became obsessed with him. She started writing him letters, and she feels like he's her like twin, like they're soulmates. And she's an author, and she's also like an empath where she feels like she can see things that other people can't. And so she notices like victims or people that are being victimized, and she'll go out of her way to befriend them and try to help them through whatever they're going through. And so she's been through a lot, but she feels like she's meant for him. And so finally, after a bunch of stuff that goes on, she shows up to his church, and she basically lays it all out there for him. She doesn't like hide anything or try to like slowly get to know him. She dives right in, lets him know like, I'm here to save you, I'm here to help you. And she tempts him a little bit with her body, but doesn't do it in like a creepy or forward way. She kind of just shows him he's not happy, he's not truly a priest at this point, and like he's just going through the motions and not really in his faith. And so and they are faithful. She's just showing him like, we are meant to be together. And so it's this romance between them and like two soulmates coming together. So I really loved it. I think it was really moving. It was had a lot of sad, you know, content and things that these two were going through. But I really enjoyed it. I think it shows them like throughout the years, so it doesn't just like end with them together. You get to see them throughout the years, and I just really, really loved it. So I ended up giving this one 5 stars. And then I think I gave it 3 chilies. I can't remember. Sorry, I didn't write it down here. Oh yeah, I did give it 3 chilies. Okay, so anyways, the last book that I read was She Tempts the Duke by Lorraine Heath. This is the first book in the Last Lords of Pembroke. This one had a really cool setup, and I'm very interested in continuing with the series because it's about 3 brothers. Sebastian is the hero in this one, and he is supposed to be the future Duke of Pembroke. But him and his brothers get basically locked up in this tower in Pembroke and by their uncle, because he's basically planning to kill them so that he can be the heir and take everything. They kind of think he might have killed their dad too. But Mary, their neighbor, and she is like a neighbor, and she's best friends with Sebastian. They, I think, shared like a kiss. So they're like kind of like childhood sweethearts, best friends. She overhears this, and so she sneaks in and rescues them, gets them out of there. And so they have to flee. They have to go on the run because they wouldn't really be safe. And so he tells her, I'll be back in like 10 years. So when I'm of age to be the Duke, and I'll meet you here. But he never does. And so it's about 12 years later when he finally returns home. But by the time he returns home, she is engaged. And he comes home and he's severely scarred. Like, his eye is totally damaged. He's scarred all down his face. And so he is definitely the wounded, scarred hero that doesn't think he could be with her. And, you know, now he's back to take his rightful place. And so you kind of have friends to lovers here because she's set to be engaged. She's happy with that. She's like kind of just settling for a nice guy. There's nothing wrong with her, like future husband. But she's constantly drawn to him. And so, you know, these two are like kind of butting heads here. Like, honestly, this wasn't amazing to me because this hero fought this for so long. And I felt like they weren't even like fully invested and wanting to be with each other till like way in the end. So I just didn't feel it completely, and he was fighting it for so long that it was just dragging this out. And so it's not my favorite Lorraine Heath, but I still think it's really well done. And I can't wait to read his brothers, especially Rafe's, because I think they all went on different paths. And like Rafe, I think, owns like a gambling den, and then his twin brother like became like he was out at sea. I don't know if he was being a pirate or something. So I'm very interested to see the brothers' romances. So I ended up giving that one 4 stars and 2.5 chilies. So those are the books that I read this week. Thank you so much for watching. If you can, please remember to hit that subscribe button, leave me a comment down below, and I will see you guys on the next one.